Hey Dave, this is Amanda, the admin staff helping with the minutes.
Hi,
I
Amanda.
just wanted to let you know we are recording and streaming now, so we're ready when things start to get going, more people come in.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
Yep.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Are we live? Admin, we're live and on YouTube while waiting?
Yes, we are rolling on YouTube and eScribe.
Perfect.
Hi, Aaron.
How are you, Dave?
Good.
Good.
Hey, Aaron.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well.
Oh, hi, everybody. I just saw Aaron. Now I see everybody. Hi, everybody.
Hi. Aaron, did you get any word from folks as to whether they would not be attending today?
I don't think so unless someone reached out to our admin staff saying they would not be. I know Mirta should be joining us shortly. I was just on another call with her a few minutes ago, so we should expect her shortly. And do you know if Josh is planning to jump on?
I do not. Let me send him a text message. Well, maybe we'll get rolling and see if a few other folks join us as we move along. So, welcome everyone. Let's call to order today's PCT meeting of July 21st. Get some feedback if folks want to mute their microphones, that might help. As we get rolling here, if folks have questions at any point or comments, please go ahead and use the ever popular raising your hand function or wave at me and we'll get you queued up here. So for starters, let's do a little bit of roll call to see who of the TPCC representatives are on the line with us today. And we'll begin with Mirta.
Present.
Peter Benson. No Peter yet. Mayor Engen.
I am here. Thank you.
Don MacArthur.
I'm here, Urban Transportation District.
Lucia.
This is Ryan Hammond here from Federal Highways for Lucia.
Great. It does not look like Commissioner Slotnick is here yet, unless you're lurking out there and I don't see you. Okay, I am here, Dave Strohmeyer, Missoula County Commission. Bob Boson.
Jacqueline Smith for Bob Boson.
Okay. And Debbie Johnston.
Present and representing the Air Pollution Control Board.
Excellent. All right. We have minutes to approve from June 16th. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Seeing none, they will stand approved. Is there anyone from the public or public comment on items not on today's agenda? None. Okay, we'll hold that thought. If anything comes to mind or if folks join us, you can certainly chime in later. We'll just kick things right off with you, Aaron. We have a bit of old business, and this is a review of the draft FY 2021 Unified Planning Work Program.
Hey, yeah. Can everyone see my screen sharing?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is an update. I know we didn't have much time for this last month, and so I wanted to come back and kind of quickly go through a quick overview and then maybe have a discussion on potential projects that we could fund over the next fiscal year, and get some feedback from this committee on what our priorities should be as we move forward and wrap up a few projects and possibly have some time to start new ones or assist with funding planning projects that other folks have going on. So see if I can, there we go. So if you'll remember, the Unified Planning Work Program is what we adopt every year. It sets the MPO's work plan. It determines lays out how we're going to allocate our available federal PL dollars and is set for each federal fiscal year. So it's one of the many fiscal years that we deal with between the city, the county, and the federal government. But the MPO does operate on the federal fiscal year, so it's October 1 through September 30th. So we're kind of just now wrapping up the last quarter of fiscal year 2020. And so we have, this is the opportunity to kind of go through what we have that we have ongoing and what funds we have available and how we might want to use them. So I want to start with some of the work that we have that we're doing now is going to bleed over into the new federal fiscal year. So the biggest of those is the long range transportation plan update. We're kind of in the middle of that. We anticipate that going and continuing through the spring. And so we have it budgeted, but the full amount, I believe, budgeted in the current UPWP, but we'll include some funding, the remainder of that contract. And obviously staff's time committed to doing that update. So that'll continue. We are currently working on updating our travel demand model. I think that's moving along pretty well. And so we may have that largely wrapped up by the end of this federal fiscal year, but it is sort of ongoing related to the long range transportation plan. So there may be elements of that contract that also kind of continue into 2021, but not a huge amount. We've also been working on a pavement condition assessment for the MPO, and we're partnering with the city and the county. So we'll actually have pavement condition report for both the city and the county and for the MPO area. And so that project we're getting pretty close to wrapped up on. We have a draft reports that we're reviewing and fine tuning and working with the consultant to get all of that in order. So hopefully we'll have some presentations coming up for that. We also have the East Missoula Highway 200 corridor plan. You'll hear a presentation after this on where we're at, but that's another one that's going to definitely continue into the next fiscal year. And so that contract will roll over into the next UPWP. We also have a Reserve Street Community Input Project that is continuing despite setbacks related to COVID. It's happening kind of in the background. Our consultants there are working on interviews and some case studies related to users on Reserve Street. And so hoping to have that largely wrapped up in this current fiscal year. So by the end of September. So again, we'll come back when we have something to report on that project. It's moving a little bit slower. Just the COVID has created some issues with actually engaging with people. And so it's been a little bit of a challenge on that project, but we're continuing on. We've also this year helped to fund the Molinary Master Plan. That's another project where I think our funding is largely, or our piece of that is largely complete related to the transportation network and typical sections. And we've done a lot of work on that leading up to and to support the build grant. There's been a lot of communication back and forth between those teams. And we did a fair amount of modeling and other work to help support those projects. So that's one that we funded this year. And then we have ongoing data collection that we do every year that includes our bike ped count program and our traffic counts. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we hoped to accomplish or what we had going on in FY20. It's a lot, and there's a lot of projects. And so we'll wrap up some and continue on others. For FY21, the outlook is pretty good in terms of available PL funds. So we have our annual allocation that's about $700,000 that we'll add into the pot. We also have unobligated funds from the current fiscal year. That's PL funds that we had available in FY20 that we didn't obligate to a project. So that was about a little over 300,000. And then there are some corrections from previous fiscal years. So in FY19, we had budgeted a certain amount. We didn't use all of that because projects didn't get started on time, or we just didn't spend the money that we had budgeted. That happens, it'll happen again in FY20 because projects won't be completed in that fiscal year. So there's a correction of about 632,000 that carried over. So we add that in. There another minor correction to FY20. And then every year we allow MDT to take 13.42% of our available PL funds to use statewide. And one of the reasons we have that agreement is MDT covers the local match on our PL funds. And so this allows them to have statewide planning funds available. So that takes about 80,000 out, but all in all, we anticipate having a little over $1.5 million available for planning related to transportation in the MPO region. So to put that into context, I wanted to talk a little bit about our near-term outlook. We do anticipate having potentially one or two, or maybe as many as 3 new MPOs in Montana based on the 2020 census. It's not going to happen immediately. We need to wait for the census numbers to come back, look to see if those areas have reached that 50,000 person threshold. Some of that depends on how the urban areas are drawn and what populations are included in that, but really expect Bozeman. It's been growing fast enough. I'm fairly certain in confidence that Bozeman will be an MPO. There's some potential that Helena has grown enough, depending on how that boundary gets drawn and what the census looks like, that Helena could be an MPO. And then I think kind of the outlier is the Kalispell Flathead area and whether or not there's been enough growth there to form an MPO. So what that means is we have new MPOs, but our federal funds coming into the state, I believe it's population based. And so, and in relation to all the other states. So having new MPOs doesn't mean we automatically get more PL funds coming into the state. And so it will have a budget impact on our available planning funds to support the MPO and do that transportation planning work. So there may be some incentive to bank some PL funds for some of our larger projects in the near future. I don't think it's going to affect us until maybe 2023 or so when those new MPOs get established and they're actually being allocated planning funds. But the flip side of that is we can only hold our PL funds in reserve for about 3 years. The federal government doesn't like to see money just sitting in the bank waiting to be used. That's at a statewide level, and so MDT can sort of shift funds around, and they're always using the oldest PL funds first. As we get reimbursed from MDT, they're reimbursing us from the oldest PL funds first. So we're not totally limited to that 3 years, but it's a good guideline that we want to be sort of using those planning funds as they come in, but we can hold some reserve, and it's probably a good idea moving forward.
Aaron, this is Dave. Has there ever been an instance where we've lost funds because it's been held too long?
I don't think so. Not in the time that I've been here. There have been minor rescissions. Not that, last year we were talking about potentially losing a lot, having a major rescission and losing some of those funds. There's some incentive to spend them quickly. There are other smaller, I think, maybe in the 80 to 100,000 range over the last 4 or 5 years, but it's pretty infrequent. So I think statewide, we do a pretty good job of making sure that between the 3 MPOs and the work that MDT does in the rest of the state, that we're using up those older funds and we're cycling through it appropriately.
Thanks.
But I think, if we had $1 million in the bank for 5 or 6 years, that might start to be an issue. So just putting together kind of a preliminary budget outlook. We have our ongoing administrative costs, staff, things that we're paying out every year just for basic operation of the MPO. And then I started adding in some of our ongoing other costs that I know we'll have, including the long-range transportation plan. Some of those costs will roll over into FY21. Those sort of ongoing planning projects I've included in this preliminary budget. So what this shows is what we would have in our budget if we didn't add anything new. And that's about spending about $1 million. Again, that's $300,000 or $400,000 worth of ongoing planning projects that are going to continue. But then we have about $750,000 in reserve. So that's the money that we would have available to program for additional planning work in the next federal fiscal year. So with this is the kind of a draft of the table that will end up being in the UPWP when we have the draft document next month. But hopefully we'll have some more numbers in here in terms of what we hope to fund in addition to what we're already doing. So that leads us to trying to brainstorm some project ideas and thinking about what we want to tackle in the next this upcoming fiscal year with those available PL funds. And so I spent a lot of time talking to other staff at the city and the county and other partners to see what might be coming up that we could partner on. I think in some ways that's the easier task for us, where we can just contribute money to other planning projects, just knowing that staff capacity can get limited, especially with how much we were trying to spend and get done this year, that we don't have a ton of capacity, but there are some real opportunities out there, and things that have come out of other plans. So the downtown master plan had some recommendations on looking at Higgins through the hip strip and evaluating some changes there. We're working on our Reserve Street project. I don't know that will give us, that will be done in time to really stimulate some ideas, but some ideas that have come up in talking with those other partners and in feedback from TTAC At the MPO level, a couple ideas that are out there that I think are timely and worth considering. One is a TDM action plan or transportation options action plan. So looking at some of the programs and work that we do around transportation demand management or transportation options, and looking at things like the downtown master plan had recommendations for regulatory changes that we maybe shift away from just requiring parking everywhere to more of a fully multimodal consideration. So there are it's changing our regulatory environment to be sort of more flexible, but also forcing development to consider something other than just adding a lot of parking as mitigation for transportation impacts. And there's a number of ways that we could do that. And it relates to both the downtown in terms of not having any parking requirements currently for new development and needing to think about how development is mitigating for that transportation impact. Thinking about potential TDM districts. So you have what, I guess it's maybe on hold now, but thinking about riverfront triangle development, hospital expansion, starting to create enough activity in that area that it could form a really interesting TDM district. And there may be other places that would lend themselves to that kind of thinking, in sub areas, and how are all of those different businesses and developments and residential, how are they all working together, and how can we think about transportation demand management holistically for those areas. And so I think it would help us to have a consultant come in and look at where we're at as a community, what resources do we have available, what's working in other communities. I don't know that there would be a lot of peers of our size that are doing this, but in terms of how Missoula is growing and our limited ability to sort of expand ever outward, we need to get a little bit more sophisticated in thinking about how we're managing transportation demand and how it relates to new development. So it would just give us some kind of a roadmap for how we would move forward with that and what we might be ready for, and how we can not just be adding on additional regulations, but thinking creatively about what we have. So that I think is, the timing is good for that. We're in a little bit of a lull maybe in terms of some of these larger developments. I don't know how long that will last, but there's some opportunity there. And then we have some other programs like our neighborhood greenways that we've been working on trying to implement, and other emerging programmatic work that might come out of the long range transportation plan. And there is a preliminary programmatic recommendation memo in the LRTP item that you might take a look at and just see if there are, it's giving us some ideas of things that we might want to look at and fund. Missoula County has a number of projects that we could potentially partner on. I think the most relevant is a countywide trails plan. Obviously, the MPO could only contribute to the transportation related trails planning within the MPO planning area. That might be a significant piece of that planning effort. And it's something we've kind of talked off and on about. We have a sidewalk master plan and we have a bicycle facilities master plan, and sort of trails are the backbone of each of those. And it might be worth doing some targeted planning around how are we developing those core commuter trail networks, and what might be, how can we use a sub plan like that to inform the long range transportation plan. There also is some potential for doing infrastructure planning in the Y area as a place of potential future growth. There's some activity happening out there now. There's some utilities, but really thinking about the transportation infrastructure and how we are developing that as development occurs. So that might be an opportunity. And then looking at some urban area neighborhood planning. So areas like Bonner, West Riverside, some of those areas that are outside of the city limits, but within the urban area, and thinking about what is implementation of the pedestrian facilities master plan or some of these other things look like in those at a neighborhood level. And then the last from the county would be supporting the passenger rail work that Commissioner Strohmeyer has been leading the charge on, and helping participate in planning and analysis of how we get passenger rail in the corridor and serving Missoula again. Again, we're limited to, like, we can't pay for a whole statewide passenger or even a corridor-wide passenger rail study, but we could help support from, what there will be some math involved in terms of like what is Missoula's contribution to that greater effort, and how does it relate to our long range planning. And so I think we can potentially help with some of that preliminary work. And then at the city level, there are a number of projects that are really timely. One is as I mentioned, the Higgins hip strip corridor, essentially from Broadway to Brooks. That was a recommendation in the downtown master plan. We had a recent high profile crash there just last week. We don't know how we don't know all the details about that crash, but it just highlights the need that when the Higgins Bridge is done, we're going to have really, really good multimodal facilities on the bridge, but the hip strip is certainly lacking, and we hear every day about people feeling unsafe biking through that section. And then from Broadway to the bridge, we have bike lanes, but maybe that's not the most ideal. It's in the door zone. There's some issues there. So that feels really timely, getting some analysis done, knowing that the bridge is going to be complete in a year and a half or 2 years. So moving ahead with that. And
Aaron,
then
can I ask you a question? Sorry to interrupt.
sure.
I was on mute on the county side and I was trying to.
Yeah, all right. Do you want me to go back?
Yeah, no. So could the MPO help at all with that parking situation you were out looking at the other day by Sharon? And what would that help look like?
Yeah,
It's not a very big project in dollars, but I think it would have a really big impact in terms of quality of life for people who live in the area.
Yeah, in terms of the context of planning, for the UPWP, this is how we're spending our planning funds. So one of the ways that we're already helping on that, or can help, is just through the East Missoula Highway 200 corridor. That's already kind of within the scope of that project, and we can help refine some of the designs for that.
Great.
As far as actual construction, that maybe is a different conversation about what funds we have available and whether we can help build parking.
And there's a trail piece.
Yeah.
1,000 feet of trail.
Yep. The trail piece is where I think potentially Yeah. Again, I don't know. The funding we'd have available is really CMAQ. And so maybe that's a different conversation. And as we get to the point where we're actually ready to move forward on that, we should continue to have that conversation.
So basically it'd be planning and potential work on the trail.
Yeah, I think that would be the most that we could do.
Great.
I don't know.
Anything to chip away at it.
Yeah.
FWP is into helping, and Shane just said yesterday there's a chance that MDT would be into a land trade for some other county land we have near Sealing Lake. So that's what we could bring to it anyway. But I'm glad. I just wanted to hear you say out loud there's something you could bring to it.
Yeah, it's
Aaron, this would be from the planning angle, correct? No, these funds could not be used for project implementation.
These funds could not, but we also have CMAQ funds that could potentially be used for the shared use path component of it. But that's a different, I guess that's a different conversation. But we can certainly have it.
And we can make use of some of the work WGM already did on the parking lot.
Yeah, and I think that's where we can really help, is in that preliminary, not the engineering design, but just doing some of the pieces related to what Kate is going to talk about in a few minutes.
And let the record show that Commissioner Josh Slotnick has joined the meeting.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah, sure. So the other few pieces, the North Reserve Scott Street Urban Renewal District, there's some infrastructure planning that can happen. There's a lot of growth and potential around the area north of the railroad tracks along Scott Street, or west of Scott Street. And the city and others are moving forward with planning for that area. So that might be something that we could partner on, thinking about how to implement the transportation network there. And then the front main conversion, that's kind of been on the list for a long time to get done, but what the downtown master plan sort of helped identify is there a need to do some more neighborhood access planning on the east end of that. So around the Kiwanis neighborhood, and then maybe around the Higgins interface, depending on what comes out of, or if we're doing planning around the hip strip section. And then finally, there's some interest, I think, to do some fiscal growth analysis at the city level, and ideally the county's a partner in that, thinking about urban growth around Missoula, and just evaluating what the fiscal impacts of different types of growth are, in terms of the requirement to serve it, the tax base you generate, and using that fiscal analysis then to think about growth a little bit differently, and where we're growing and how, and what that is ultimately going to cost us all as taxpayers in the future. So can be really handy, and there would be a transportation component of that. Like, what does it cost to provide and maintain transportation infrastructure under different growth scenarios? So it might tie in nicely with the work that we're doing with the long range transportation plan and road split goals and some of these other things, but would be sort of more of a fiscal side of that equation. Those are kind of the ideas that are out there that I've heard from other staff at both the city and the county. I think they're all would be really good projects. I will say the ones that I put asterisks next to are the ones that feel more, I guess the term is well, ready for funding and ready to go. Obviously, all of these would need some work in developing what the scope is and whether we're hiring a consultant or doing it in-house. But there's a need for those, I think, pretty immediately. So where we're at now, we will need to adopt the UPWP next month. So we'll have a full draft document, and my hope is to have sort of all of these things filled in and have a clear picture of what we want to fund. So that would be coming back in August. We'll do a little bit of updating our administrative costs, and I'll review where our existing contracts are and where I think they'll be in October 1. So fine tune those numbers a little bit. But what I think would be helpful right now is to get some feedback from this committee on what your priorities are for the next year. What you think we should prioritize, knowing that we probably can't realistically do all of this. But we have some money to spend on some of these pieces. So we'd love to get some feedback on what you think those priorities are, so then I can program that into the UPWP and bring it back next month.
Thanks, Aaron. So to the committee, what are your thoughts on the potential projects that Aaron has identified already, or other items that might be missing from the list? Don.
This is maybe in that second category of other items. But Aaron, I'm wondering if you could comment on the Brook Street corridor work that's been underway. It seems like that might make sense for some PL funds to go toward it as well. Again, it's an existing project that's gotten some of the way through planning, but no doubt could use some more help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's another one that's pretty easy to, dedicate some money to. And I would definitely agree that moving that project forward and elevating it would be a really good idea. And so I think that's something I could, I've had conversations with Ellen and Corey, and obviously looped into that project. So but that's a good point. I can add that to the list and see what our upcoming steps are and how much. We're starting to get into the parts of that project where PL funds are, may or may not be eligible, or the expenses may or may not be eligible for PL funds, but I think there is that public involvement component in particular that really needs to be tackled. So
yeah,
absolutely.
I think that, we've certainly heard from Midtown that they are interested in the idea of engaging Midtown in a robust way. Would be very important as a next step.
Yeah, and actually, you just brought up a good point. I don't know why I didn't include this in the list, but the Midtown Association did reach out to me and asked about potential funding for a master plan. And so that might be another one would be one that would potentially get added to this list. And so if anyone on this committee has thoughts on how a Midtown master plan might rank in terms of priorities, or whether it would even, you'd support funding for a master plan, and that would tie nicely into the Brooks corridor.
Yeah, I guess a question I would have on that sort of master planning effort is just what the scope of that would look like. Would it be on the same order of magnitude of what a downtown master plan just look like? In which case we would just need to figure out what kind of carve out of our role would be as the MPO for that.
Yeah, I think, yeah,
You froze up, Aaron.
Rose, Aaron.
$300,000 to $500,000 range seems to be what people are investing in those plans. And so to give you a context for the current downtown master plan that was just adopted, the MPO contributed, I think it was $50,000 to that to cover the transportation pieces. And so that might be a reasonable estimate for what the Midtown plan what our contribution could be for the Midtown plan.
Sure.
If that's helpful.
Yeah,
Aaron, I would just second my support for that. I feel like that area is screaming out for redevelopment, for better connectivity, and for creating spaces that people want to be while they're out of their car. And I feel like it's maybe even 10 years too late that we start that work, but really ripe for it. I'd love to see it done. And I also want to reiterate some support for the countywide trails plan, which is also long overdue.
Thanks, Josh. And, other comments from the committee? Missing items? It looks like you might have gotten close to hitting the mark here, Aaron. And I guess not surprisingly, and I don't know if Councilwoman Becerra would want to chime in on this, but certainly I'm supportive of seeing what role an MPO like ours could play in furthering a regional passenger rail restoration effort from a planning standpoint.
Yeah, and on that note, I did reach out to our friends at the MDT planning just to see what would be eligible for, or whether PL funds, passenger rail would be eligible for PL funds. And I think that I think the general consensus is yes, and we could use them. We just have to make sure that we're, not paying for the full corridor piece. So I think there is a role there for the MPO, and what I could do, or what we could consider doing for this year's UPWP, since we don't really know exactly what it'll be, is sort of pencil in an estimated amount that we would be willing to contribute, and maybe that's $15,000 or $20,000 that would be used to support whatever we think the Missoula area's contribution to feasibility studies would be.
Yeah, and as we discussed, I think doing a little bit of just calling around to other MPOs that clearly have a rail component to see how they skin this cat would be useful.
Yep.
Other thoughts?
I just wanted to chime in, Dave, that I think that even though PL funds might not be able to pay for most of a passenger rail study, I think that being able to leverage those funds and see who else can help us, achieve that goal, that's a really important first step. I think it's time that we have that conversation, as I think all know we can't rely so heavily on our highway system for travel and transport. So I'm very supportive of that. I also think that the TDM action plan is going to be really important as we continue to grow, finding ways to decrease our dependence on single occupant vehicle travel is going to be really important, particularly to areas west of Reserve Street, as the Mullen area continues to grow. So I'm glad to see that on the list. Also the North Reserve and Scott Street. I think that's going to be another area that we'll have to look at transportation options and planning around that area as it also continues to develop in terms of housing. Curious to know if the Y area infrastructure planning would touch on or relate to airport planning, see how we can piggyback on what they are doing or inform this planning process. I think it's important to know what we're looking at in terms of airport expansion and how that's going to affect growth in that area. So just just putting that out there. But I think this list is right on.
Great. Thank you. And Aaron, I trust that if you have any questions from either the county or the city on any of these items between now and our next meeting, as we finalize the UPWP, feel free to reach out and we can talk through what might make sense.
Yeah, I think having this feedback is helpful to understand where the committee's priorities are, and then we can follow up with the staff working on these projects and get some more refinement and try to put some number. I mean, these are general concepts, but we can try to put some numbers into these. And again, I think it's really good when we can do partnerships. So the MPO pays for, helps get projects going and get started, but that there are, other funding sources that help. So thinking about Higgins maybe being a partnership with the city or the parking commission or the urban renewal districts, and thinking about how we put that together so it's not all on the MPO and other partners, I guess, have some skin in the game on those projects as well. So, yeah.
Right. Any final thoughts before we move on?
I'm sorry, I just have one more coming in
right.
kind of late here, but
Sure.
so some MPOs around the country have started to put together standalone plans related to connected and automated vehicles. It's still a ways in the future, but just to start to think about what potential impacts of CAV, I don't know if that's an acronym y'all familiar with yet, but connected and automated vehicles, what the impact would have on safety and congestion and local policy. I mean, you've got everything from infrastructure concerns to policy related concerns. Anyway, I mean, some MPOs are starting to kind of put that into their long range planning efforts. Others are doing standalone efforts along those lines. So again, just kind of maybe a more outside the box idea if you're looking for other projects to take on.
I don't know that I'm looking for a lot of projects right now, but I think that's a really good idea. And it's something that I will, maybe as we come out of the long range plan, we'll have more clarity on that. We are working with Nelson Nygaard on one of the components of our planning process is an emerging mobility playbook. Mm-hmm. We're not just looking at connected and autonomous vehicles, but other emerging mobility trends like scooters or micromobility or ride sharing or all of those pieces. And so there may be some recommendations that come out of that that help us decide how we want to move forward with some of those technology pieces.
Right.
Thanks.
So that's a good.
Debbie, did you have a comment?
I think much of mine was hit. I think just probably reiterate support for the countywide trails study and for the Scott Street North Reserve area, just because of the interaction of those areas, as well as Mullen with the opportunity zone and what might happen in those areas in terms of planning. And then probably a question, Aaron, on the travel demand model. When is that work going to be complete? You probably said, and I just missed it.
It's sort of ongoing. We have an updated model that we're using and kind of refining right now. So we did some modeling work for the Builds project, just to get some future traffic volumes. And so now we're kind of at the point of needing to develop what scenarios we're going to evaluate in the long range plan. And so the model's largely, it's not 100%, maybe done, but we have the model updated and ready to go for evaluating the long range plan.
Okay, so this group will see that with LRTP development?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that'll probably be the next time you see info coming out of the model when some of it's already kind of there in the existing conditions report. We had some, but again, it's mostly just what are the existing conditions and how is the model, like we use that to help calibrate the model. So when we start getting into our scenarios and looking at project evaluation and things like that, we'll be using the model pretty regularly to help evaluate those pieces.
Okay, thanks.
Mirta, do you have another comment?
No, that's probably my hand raised from before.
Okay.
Thanks.
Consider it lowered. Anything else, folks? All right. Well, thanks for your work on this, Aaron, and we look forward to seeing the more fine-grained breakdown and budget next month.
Great. Thanks. Appreciate the feedback.
Okay, let's move on to Highway 200 corridor design alternatives.
All right.
Sarah.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the project a little bit. Kate Dinsmore from WGM will be talking about the design alternatives today, but I just kind of wanted to let everyone know where we're at. We had 3 draft design alternatives prepared that were corridor wide the beginning of this month. And then we also have 4 emphasis areas, which are East Broadway and kind of some of the access management concerns there. The railroad underpass and I-90, access management concerns along the East Missoula part of the corridor, and then finally the Sharon parking improvements, which we've kind of already touched on a little bit today. So those are available online at our website. Again, for any of you who haven't visited our website before, it's www.missoulaMPO.com, and the East Missoula project is under the participate link. So this month, we had originally planned to have an in-person open house. We had kind of planned it a while back before coronavirus stuff got real bad again. And last minute, we decided to cancel it and move it to an online Zoom meeting, which we now know is a really, really good decision now that we see what the county and the state has decided to do regarding COVID. But we did go ahead and have that meeting on July 14th. We had a little more than 40 members of the public there, I believe, if I remember right from the Zoom information. And I think overwhelmingly, we had a fairly positive response. People are really excited to see the designs. However, it is a lot of information. And so we continue just to get a lot of feedback through the website and through email and through other means. So we will know kind of by the end of the month what we're hearing from the public. So we're really excited about that, and we'll have a good report from WGM here soon. Just so everyone knows kind of the next steps, there will be a draft preferred alternative available and out for public review by October. So that's kind of the plan right now. And then a draft plan will be ready in January, approved in February, and then we'll go out for implementation and kind of start investigating some of those creative funding options, which WGM is kind of investigating for the implementation phase of this project. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Again, July 31st is the deadline for final public comment on this phase of the design process. And everything is still available online. And so that I'm gonna flip it over to Kate. I think she'll show you some of the online resources and then primarily go into what those design alternatives look like. So thanks everyone. And if you've been involved, we really appreciate it.
Sarah. Kate, it's all yours.
All right, sounds good, thanks. All right, so I'm Kate Dinsmore. I'm project manager with WGM Group for the East Missoula Highway 200 corridor plan. All right, are you guys seeing the website? Sorry, I'm not getting the normal highlighter on it. Okay, great. So just Tara gave some good background information, but just to back up just a little bit more, why is a corridor plan needed? And so this was needed because to address safety issues along Highway 200. The major issues are congestion around Van Buren intersection and Eastgate, site and safety issues at the railroad underpass and I-90 interchanges, defined road edges and access points, seasonal congestion with river recreationists at Sharon, and incomplete bike and pedestrian connections along the length of the corridor. And so this is needed to provide detailed designs and concepts that are necessary to get a project funded, including information for cost estimates that are really critical for that funding eligibility. East Missoula is recognized as a priority given the long history of needed improvements within the community, but connectivity with the areas to the west and east are important because they affect East Missoula. And so this is an opportunity to provide that efficient and cost-effective planning now rather than addressing each area separately. So that's kind of why we're doing the project. Generally the improvements are focused within the right-of-way And we began this project by reviewing previous plans and compiling a technical report to develop a thorough understanding of the corridor to be used in the development of the design alternatives. And as Tara was saying, the design alternatives are available for public comment, and we had that virtual open house last week. So if you want any information later on, it's on the website. So we put together 3 corridor-wide alternatives, providing infrastructure updates from Van Buren through East Missoula and extending to Tamarack Road. And there's also the 4 focus areas Tara mentioned. There are 3 distinct segments within the corridor. So you're going to see the alternatives change to meet the character of each segment. So the first segment is the East Broadway, and that's from Van Buren to the westbound I-90 interchange. And then there's the East Missoula, which is kind of that central piece from westbound I-90 interchange to Brickyard Lane. And then the Shawron to Marshall segment is from Brickyard Lane to Tamarack Road. And so I'm going to provide a high-level look at the potential future improvements with these alternatives, and I'm going to focus on the bike and pedestrian amenities for each alternative. I'm not going to go into a ton of details on these, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the key focus areas and give a little bit more information with each of those. So the first one is alternative A. This is kind of termed the complete street alternative because it incorporates many elements that are typically found in a complete street, including sidewalks, landscape boulevards, raised cycle tracks, and on-street bike lanes. And this provides the most opportunity for landscape and aesthetic improvements. So we have a boulevard sidewalk from Van Buren to Easy Street on the south side of the highway, and along with on-street bike lanes on both the north and south side. Through East Missoula, there are boulevard sidewalks on both sides of the street with raised cycle tracks. And then a shared use path connects East Missoula to Shawron, and then on to Tamarack. And then there's also opportunities for on-street parking in strategic locations in the East Broadway and East Missoula segments where additional parking is needed for businesses and multifamily housing. And then the second option is alternative B. This has a shared use path connection throughout the corridor that accommodates a range of users. It includes a shared use path from Van Buren over to Easy Street. And and then a shared use path that connects Van Buren and downtown to East Missoula, extending along the base of Mount Jumbo, and then extending through East Missoula on the north side and then over to Tamarack. The East Missoula segment also includes a sidewalk on the south side of the highway. And then there's also opportunity for that on-street parking in the East Broadway segment and in East Missoula. And the third alternative maximizes parking throughout the East Broadway and East Missoula segment while providing curbside sidewalks and on-street bike lanes. So this alternative limits the opportunity for landscaping of boulevards by creating space for parallel parking on both sides of the street. With the additional parking on the north side of the highway through the East Broadway segment, a sidewalk is provided adjacent to the parking lane from Van Buren to Easy Street. So basically, this is the only option that has a sidewalk on this north side that goes all the way from Van Buren connecting the street. Through East Missoula, there are curbside sidewalks and parallel parking. Additionally, a shared use path is located on the south side of the highway connecting East Missoula to Shawron and Old Marshall Grade. This alternative does not provide a shared use path from Old Marshall Grade between Old Marshall Grade and Tamarack in this area. So far, the feedback from the public is showing that the shared use path is the most popular alternative. And then I'm gonna move on to the focus areas. So just to recap, the 4 focus areas are the Van Buren access management, the railroad crossing and I-90 interchanges, the East Missoula access management, and then the Shawron parking improvements. So taking you to the first one is the Van Buren access management. So this area experiences safety issues stemming from merging and expanding driving lanes associated with the Van Buren intersection and access to businesses. So to address these safety issues, we're proposing to extend the median to the east and to add a left turn lane for access to the Green Hanger and Kingfisher Flap. So basically this piece of median would extend to the east. We'd add the left turn lane here. And then to access Diamond Jim's Casino and the Lewis and Clark Trail Adventures, this would become a right in, right out access only. And then we're also asking people to give us some feedback on what type of bicycle and pedestrian amenities they like best in this area. And then we'll take that information and incorporate that into our preferred alternative. So the railroad crossing and I-90 interchange focus area. So this has been the topic of a lot of discussion. And I think that this is one of the key areas within the corridor. It lacks pedestrian and bicycle amenities due to the limitations of the narrow railroad underpass. And the width of the railroad underpass, along with the geometry of the I-90 interchanges, limits sight distances, causing safety issues. So this is a challenging area as we are limited by the existing railroad infrastructure and also maintaining railroad operations during construction. We have looked at many different options, and we've presented three options to the public that were determined to be the most feasible options. And so I'm going to start by reviewing those three options that are the most feasible. And then I'm going to also talk about some of the other options that we removed from consideration. So the first one has two roundabouts, one at each I-90 interchange, and then the roundabouts are improved the safety and intersection operations while addressing the challenging geometry of the intersections. And then it also includes a new railroad bridge that is a wider structure, and that allows for bikes and pedestrians to be accommodated adjacent to the roadway. The second option is to basically avoid the existing railroad underpass and go around it with a shared use path that connects East Missoula to Van Buren and downtown along the base of Mount Jumbo, parallel to I-90. The path design would be constructed within MDT right-of-way or within the Mount Jumbo conservation easement. And this option does not include any improvements to the I-90 interchanges included in this option. Then the third option is one roundabout at the eastbound I-90 interchange to improve safety and intersection operations, as there are more safety concerns associated with the eastbound I-90 interchange than the westbound I-90 interchange. This option does not include any improvements for bicyclists and pedestrians between Easy Street and Hayden Street. So those are the three that we have presented to the public and decided are the most feasible. The other options that we considered were an at-grade railroad crossing and a separated tunnel for pedestrians and bicyclists. The at-grade crossing, basically it would have come along the highway here, and then to kind of get up to grade, it comes off to the side and it would end up about over here. This one basically was eliminated because MRL is not interested in adding crossings because of safety concerns. There's also a requirement that crossings have to be open every 15 minutes. And since it's a double track in this area, MRL holds trains, and basically where we're proposing that at-grade crossing, and the crossing would require changes in how they operate. And so due to those safety and operational concerns, MRL was not in support of an at-grade crossing. So that one was taken off the table. We also looked at a separated tunnel for bicyclists and pedestrians. There are a lot of challenges with this. The first being constructing the tunnel. So due to the size of the tunnel, boring is not an option. And the railroad needs to maintain service during construction. So a shoe fly would need to be built to allow the trains to go around the tunnel construction. So basically you have to create kind of this temporary track so that the trains could go around where they'd be working on construction and still maintain service. And since trains are limited in their ability to make sharp turns, there's not enough space between the existing bridge over Highway 200 and proposed tunnel to allow the train to go around that tunnel construction. So that would mean that the shoe fly would have to go over Highway 200. At that point, construction would be similar to putting in a new wider structure to replace the existing bridge. There are also safety concerns with the tunnel because it's in an area without a lot of activity. Because MRL requires 150 feet from structures, so it would need to be located 150 feet from the roadway. So basically, you can't put the tunnel right next to the existing bridge because of MRL's policies. So you'd have your existing structure here, your tunnel would be over to the east, about 150 feet. And so at that point, you've got a tunnel where it's not a lot of activity, a lot of people, with eyes on it. And so it becomes this kind of safety issue. And then MRL said that they wanted fencing so that pedestrians couldn't access the railroad tracks. So then you start basically creating a longer tunnel without a way out. And so we just felt that the replacement of the existing bridge structure was a better solution for bikes and pedestrians than the tunnel, with both projects having similar construction processes and costs. So that's why that option was removed.
Wouldn't it be cheaper just to helicopter shuttle people?
It might be. It's really challenging. So the other option we looked at was a structure over the tracks. And we didn't go very far on this, but basically the tracks are about 14 feet above the highway. And then with the required clearance for over the tracks, you'd have to be almost 40 feet above the roadway. And so to get to that elevation, it's basically a ridiculous series of ramps that creates this really indirect connection that doesn't really accomplish anything. We also looked at different routes along the north side of the tracks, but there just wasn't a good option there. So that's why we landed with either it's a new railroad bridge or potentially a trail along Mount Jumbo. But just from public involvement comments, so we've gotten, it's a real split support for either the bridge or the Mount Jumbo Trail connection. So I think, one of my kind of questions as we put this out to the public was, are people even interested in that Mount Jumbo connection? And so far there seems to be some interest in it. So we'll kind of see what other comments we get over the next couple weeks.
Melissa, do you have a sense of how much that would cost? Just the trail on Jumbo.
We are working on costs for this. That's the piece that we don't have the cost for yet because it was kind of one of the last things we added. So we'll have that soon. And we're working through feasibility as well on that.
Yeah, Kate, something I mentioned yesterday in a meeting on the same topic with Aaron Wilson is that, well, I guess two things. One, I rode my bike out there here recently just to refresh my memory what it's like to bike through that underpass, and it's bad to say the least from a safety standpoint. And I guess one thing that I would not want to have happen, and as kind of an unintended consequence of putting a trail along the base of Mount Jumbo, would be that would make it less likely that we would at some point in the near term be able to address what I think is the ultimate solution by way of just enlarging that underpass area for both bikes and pedestrians. So sorry I took you off the path there. So continue on, Kate. And we've probably got about 10 minutes or so before we need to move on to the next agenda item.
Dave, I saw Don raising his hand.
Don, using the old-fashioned hand wave. Go ahead.
Just to, maybe this sort of ties into the comments about the trails, but I guess I was wondering what the plan is for the pedestrian between Eastgate and the rail bridge. It feels like if we're going to, there's a lot of territory between there, and it's very unpedestrian friendly for the most part. There's some trail access for parts of it, but I'm interested how that ties in to the two ends that you showed us.
Kate?
Are you talking about, I guess I'm not really following your question. Are you asking about whether kind of what amenity we're proposing along the highway for pedestrians, or connections to other trails.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, what is a boulevard? I mean, there's a lot of asphalt along there, a lot of access points, and
Mhm.
it isn't exactly like a neighborhood boulevard sidewalk. And so I guess that's my question is what do we want to invest in as a community as we go forward? Feels like there's very different things between that trail that's on the base of Jumbo and developing East Broadway. And they serve different functions. I think from my perspective, I'm most interested in the function of developing East Broadway. But I'm also worried about how much money that might take to make it viable. You know, there is a sidewalk along Reserve Street, but people don't use it much.
Yeah, I think that you're right. There are a lot of driveways along East Broadway, and there are always going to be a lot of driveways along East Broadway because we're up against the river, and you can't. I mean, you have to provide access to those properties. I don't think there's a lot you can do about that. But I think that we can put in, you know, right now there's a sidewalk that gets used a lot by bicyclists. They don't use, you know, there's a lot of housing. I think there's a lot of college students that hop on the sidewalk, go over past Eastgate and over the bridge to the university. And so I think there's a way we can make that better, but you still are going to have those driveway cuts through there. You know, as far as connecting East Missoula to downtown, you know, we'll get East Missoula connected to downtown. If we do the Mount Jumbo Trail, we're still going to lack that connection between kind of East Broadway and East Missoula without that wider bridge. So I think there's
speaking my mountain line connection too, that, you know, obviously the improvements along Highway 200 are super important to support mountain line, and the connectivity along that corridor won't be achieved with the Jumbo Trail.
Thanks, Don. All right.
all right.
Come on, Kate.
Let me keep going. Oh, great. So I just East Missoula real quickly. So this lacks curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and then it also has the numerous approaches in large areas of continuously paved property. So there's a lot of access issues and few access restrictions, I guess. So there's safety stormwater issues. So we're proposing improvements that include curb and gutter along the entire length of Highway 200 through East Missoula. This will address the stormwater and drainage issues and delineate access to businesses and residences. We're proposing a two-way left turn lane through most of East Missoula, and then also additional driveway access to provide access to existing businesses and residences. And then we're also kind of working through final design of these intersections and how they, the side streets intersect with Highway 200, making sure to accommodate the large trucks that use that area. And then I wanted to just really quickly hit on Shaw Run so that everybody knows what we've kind of been talking about. This is the area that has really heavy use during the summer months and tubing season. And the existing parking area isn't large enough to accommodate parking for all the users. So parking overflows along the shoulder of Highway 200, creating safety issues. So we're working on coming up with some issues within the right of way to address the safety problems in this area. So basically the first option is parallel parking spaces on the south side of the highway to the west of the existing fishing access area. So this is the Shaw Run fishing access. And these are protected with a median to provide a separation from the pedestrians and the roadway. It includes a variable speed limit zone, reducing the speed limit during periods of high usage. And we've also got a bus pullout, which would have an air compressor to inflate tubes, encouraging river users to ride the bus rather than to drive to the river access. And that could be either like a mountain line bus, or there could be like a shuttle option there. And that's been really, the comments we've gotten thus far, that's been pretty popular idea. And then the second option, this is the east parking lot, which you were talking about earlier. This is about just under a quarter of a mile to the east of the existing parking area. And it would it's located in existing right of way, and then it would be connected to the fishing access with a shared use path that would run along or parallel to Highway 200. And as far as the feedback between these two options, it's about 50-50. They like as I was saying, they like the idea of being able to bring like a deflated tube on a bus or shuttle and then inflate it at the access point. With the first option, they're concerned that it doesn't provide enough parking. And then with the second option with the east parking lot, they're concerned that people aren't going to want to walk all the way back to Sharon to get to the river access. This is private property between the parking lot and the river. And so I think dealing with making sure people aren't accessing through that private property would be kind of the challenge with that one. So that kind of wraps up the alternatives, the focus areas. The public comment is open through July 31st. After that, we're going to work on developing a preferred alternative, kind of mixing and matching elements from the 3 alternatives and the 4 key focus areas. So if you've got any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks.
Questions or comments?
So Kate, I just had some comments on the parking one, just because I've been working on this, and the option number 2 has the advantage of being feasible in the short term, in that MDT is enthusiastic and open. There's legal hurdles that have to be crossed, but they were excited about this, kind of in trade for the county passing a parking resolution that gets people off the highway. And Aaron was out there the other day. FWP is excited about being a partner as well. And the solution on the keeping people off the river would be a pretty big fence off the back end of the parking lot. FWP also wants to approach the private landowner to see if they'd be interested in selling, in which case FWP would move the whole fishing access over to this area. Lots of ifs there, but there's some momentum here, and just want to let you know.
Yeah, I like the idea of just moving the whole access. We've gotten several comments from neighbors. We've kind of talked to some people to the west, and I know I've kind of heard that neighborhood has talked about these options, and they're not happy about what's going on out there right now. And I think apparently originally the access was given to the county as I think for search and rescue, and it's kind of grown into something much more to that and more than that. And I think that if you could move that access away from people, it would make them a lot happier.
Yeah, it's up to a private landowner, but hopefully pressure of losing access to the road would make them see that their best sales option would be to sell to FWP.
Thanks. And I had not heard about the original intent of search and rescue, and it's clearly expanded beyond that. So
for the record, Dave and I were in middle school then, so we did not have a hand in that.
Other questions, comments from the committee? Okay, is there anyone from the public on here who would like to comment? Does not appear so. Well, thanks, Kate and Tara and Aaron. I think this is a super important project for the future of our community, so glad to see it moving forward.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on then in our final period of time for the meeting, and it looks like we will be actually having an action item today, and this is related to the long-range transportation plan update and our approval of draft goals and outcomes. So Aaron, do you want to introduce this and then involve Jennifer?
Yeah, definitely. And we can keep this one quick and try to get us all out of here by 3 o'clock. So we've presented on the draft goals and outcomes a couple of times, maybe twice now, and we've done a fair amount of public feedback and made some refinements and changes. And now we're kind of moving into more of the project identification and evaluation pieces of the long-range plan update. And so we're hoping to not necessarily fully close the door on the goals and outcomes, but to get some consensus that these are the right the right goals to move forward with as we move into that evaluation framework piece. Because these will they form the backbone of how we're approaching that evaluation and the way that we're going to look at the rest of the planning process. So I will, I think, turn it over to Jennifer to talk about what we've done with them and the feedback and the changes we've made and why. And then, yeah, hopefully have a quick action to give us the go ahead to, again, it's not, we'll officially adopt these with the plan. So again, it's not slamming the door on no more changes, but it is saying that we're good with the way that these are and moving ahead with the rest of the planning project. So Jennifer.
Thanks,
Great.
Jennifer.
Thanks, Aaron, and good afternoon, everybody. I should just say that I am attending this meeting under protest because Missoula has stolen one of my favorite civic leaders from Seattle. So there's that. But Mr. Mayor, congratulations. I'm very excited for the city of Missoula to have Rob Gannon joining you. He is a fantastic leader, and we have certainly enjoyed having him at King County Metro for the last 8+ years. So congrats to all of you, and I look forward to working with him in his new capacity. So as Aaron mentioned, we are going to give you a quick tour of a few of the changes that we have made to the draft goals to incorporate your feedback, as well as feedback from the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, from our Long Range Transportation Plan Technical Advisory Committee and Citizens Advisory Committee, from the Specialized Transportation Committee, and then also from members of the public. In your packets, you have a short memo that highlights some of the key changes that have been made. And what I've pulled up on the screen is the final version of the goals. And I will just quickly highlight where some of these changes have been and then open it up for any additional comments, questions, and ideally an action. As Aaron mentioned, even though we are calling these the final goals and desired outcomes, what this really means is that we are looking for your blessing to continue using these goals and outcomes as we develop our evaluation framework to make decisions about the projects and programs that are going to be the highest priorities coming out of the Long Range Transportation Plan. And then also that we can use these goals to help shape the performance measures that we want to hold ourselves to. So what is it that we intend to say we will accomplish through the Long Range Transportation Plan? So we have maintained the 5 goals that we shared with you previously and really have made the most significant changes in the 2nd goal around sustainability and resilience, and then also in the 4th goal around connect and strengthen communities. But I'll just highlight a few of the changes in each of the goals so that you're aware of how your feedback has been incorporated. Related to improving safety and promoting health, the most important changes here were adding a new desired outcome that focuses on linkages in lower income neighborhoods. That's the 3rd of these bullets you see on the screen. That was a recommendation that came from a few different folks to really recognize the importance of those modes in improving safety and promoting health, especially in our communities of greatest need. We also added a note related to the opportunity for increasing human connections through walking and biking as really important, especially in the current times. The 2nd goal related to advancing sustainability and community resilience. So again, there are a number of changes that we made here. First and foremost, there are changes to the language of the goals. We have incorporated community resilience, which was a specific recommendation, and really broadened the focus here beyond just natural and historic resources, so that we're also talking very explicitly about the importance of addressing climate change. So we've reshaped a few of the desired outcomes to address carbon neutrality and the fact that that is the direction the region is trying to head. We have added a new desired outcome that focuses specifically on urban canopy and green stormwater infrastructure, and then really broadened this focus on protecting resources to include natural, cultural, and historic resources, as well as agricultural lands. And then our final desired outcome here related to infrastructure focuses on adaptation and the fact that we need to be able to respond to changing needs. The 3rd goal had relatively minor changes. We did expand the language a little bit to be explicit about a focus on both people and goods. And then we added a little bit more active language and then also called out specifically people driving so that we are more inclusive of all modes of transportation. Our fourth goal around connect and strengthen communities. Really, a lot of the feedback here was the fact that this is our goal where we need to dig in and make that land use and transportation connection as explicit as possible. And so we added desired outcomes that say that focus on how we integrate land use and transportation, the importance of creating complete neighborhoods where people have access to jobs, services, schools, and parks, and then really broadening the description of the types of places that we want to connect with a focus on affordable and senior housing and basic life needs. So those are a few of the key changes within that goal. In the final goal, just a couple of key changes. One of those is to call out mixed use development specifically. And this was related to the fact that folks really wanted to see infill development and the ways that the land use and transportation are connected being highlighted throughout these goals and desired outcomes. And then we did add a new desired outcome that talks about the importance of exploring equitable and sustainable funding sources for transportation, recognizing that the mix of sources we use today is a little bit narrow and is certainly not something we can count on, especially as we see gas tax revenues decline and use a variety of funding sources that can be really difficult, especially for folks on fixed incomes. So those are a few of the changes that we've made. Again, this does incorporate feedback from a lot of different people, and we've really appreciated the amount of engagement that folks have had in these goals and desired outcomes, and would open it up for anything else that you all might feel like needs to change or potential next steps. So Erin, I think I'll turn it back to you to help think about what that action would be.
Yeah, so I included our recommended motion in the agenda, so that's, I guess, always it's our recommendation to move forward with it. But you know, if there are any final comments or thoughts before we sort of take these and move on to the next steps. But we have put a lot of work into refining the goals and outcomes in this plan, and so feels like we're in a pretty good spot to move forward. But I would, I guess, turn it back to the committee to give us that final direction.
Thanks, Aaron. And yeah, questions or comments or a motion, and the motion when it is made would be to the effect of to approve the draft goals for use in project prioritization, framework evaluation, and scenario development.
I would move that, Dave.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Slotnick. So there's a motion. Anyone want to second that?
I'll
I'd like
second.
to second that. Oh.
Too late.
Fighting over the second. I think Don may have just barely got his word in first. Okay, discussion on the motion. Yeah, Don.
I would give you a big round of applause. I think these are as good as any of these goal statements that I've ever seen.
Great.
Yeah, I concur. Nicely
Really well done.
framed. Mirta.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you for putting forward goals that intertwine land use and transportation so well. I'm happy to support it.
Great. Anyone else with a burning desire to comment or ask a question? All right, Jennifer, it looks like you might have hit the mark with this iteration. So good job. We've got a
Great.
motion on the floor in a second. Let's go ahead and vote. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
There's a raised hand from the mayor who's muted. Any opposed? Okay. It looks like you've got your marching orders to go forth with this.
Great. Thank you all very much. Erin, do you want to introduce the programmatic recommendations for the committee?
Yeah, it's kind of the last piece of this update from the long range plan. We have this preliminary memo that Nelson Nygaard has drafted for us, just thinking about as we're moving forward with the long range plan, but also knowing that we have the UPWP update coming up, or that we're working on that. We thought it would be a good idea to start thinking about not just the project ideas that we're collecting for that sort of infrastructure project list, but start thinking about other programmatic pieces that we might want to fund, either through the MPO or the city or the county, or however we might approach that. And so this is kind of an initial thought on what some of those programmatic ideas that we've heard about or thinking about in the process. And so, Jennifer, unless you have anything else to add, we have this memo. I'd encourage everyone on the committee to take a look at that and put some thought into it and think about how, we know just building infrastructure is not the only, we're not going to capture everyone, and we're not going to achieve our mode split goals unless we think about the land use, the infrastructure, and then these other programmatic pieces that help support people in making those choices and moving us sort of one step at a time towards a more multimodal system. So thinking about they may not be the most expensive or the biggest piece of our plan, but the programmatic elements are really key. And so take a look at that. And if there's any feedback initially,
Erin, I think all I would add to that is two quick pieces. One being that with your approval of these goals for us to move forward, we will start to attach performance measures to them. And as you'll note in this memo, these programmatic actions are really about helping to tie to those goals and to the performance measures. So I hope that you see that start to come full circle. And then also I did just want to plug, we've got about another week and a half that we are accepting project ideas from people. And we've got a handful of different avenues for folks to do that on the MPO's website. We have received about 75 new project ideas already. And so while that piece is moving forward, we did want to start, as Erin said, the development of some of the program and policy pieces as well, knowing that we're never going to build our way to all of the goals that we just identified, but that it is going to take a really holistic suite of approaches and solutions. So please do encourage folks to continue submitting project ideas, and we'll look forward to more conversation with you all about policies, programs, and certainly projects as we move forward.
Great, thanks. Well, with that, any closing comments or anything else to add? Good of the order. All right, well, we're actually going to get out a few minutes early. So thanks everyone for your participation today, and we will see you back next month in August.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
Goodbye.